Welcome back to Driving and Dragons. Daniel, and today is a bonus content video. That's right, folks. Today it's a 3-for-1 special. It's 1 part D&D Reacts, 1 part You're Doing It Wrong, and 1 part YouTube drama response video. So yes, in addition to some good advice about gaming and how you're doing it wrong when it comes to fudging dice rolls, you'll be getting a dose of me taking the piss out of ClowndorDM, Steven the Clown. He retired the CondorDM title after he came back to the TTRPG commentary space a second time and showed his ass to everyone until they ran him off. Again. For those who don't like interwebs beef, apologies in advance, but I promise there will be plenty of good information about dice fudging to make the listen worthwhile. On the 280ZX, a major rainstorm today in central Alabama tested the 44-year-old seals on the car, and I'm happy to say it passed with flying colors. In the video today, we will continue with the second starter replacement. Hopefully soon we'll get to work on the brakes, as well as the removal of the 1970s era smog and environmental components that are responsible for a loss of power to the tune of around 50 horsepower. So we kick off with ClowndorDM. As a courtesy, and because I know that many of us dislike any kind of internet spat content, I'm going to add a link up to the top of the video so you can skip to the part about dice fudging. In the past 48 hours, this guy has dropped 18 videos. That may be a record even for him, as he apparently has no life outside of sitting at his computer filming 4 to 8 minute unhinged rants with a background music that would get him nailed with copyright strikes if enough people watched his videos for YouTube to care. Before anyone mentions glass houses, I make no illusions that I'm some prolific pontiff in the TTRPG world with my 163 subs. Speaking of, like, share, subscribe, please. I'd love to hit 1,000 subs sometime this year. But I average more views than him when he has 5 times the subscribers, and this clown likes to go on about how he has this amazing reputation as an elite game master, and how everybody listens to and respects him and his amazing wisdom. Of the 18 videos he dropped in the past 2 days, 10 have been related to how TTRPG commentators all hate him because they're jealous of his amazing game master knowledge and experience, oscillating wildly from how he doesn't care to how he's a victim to how all their thousands of subscribers are dead accounts and they have no real listeners, but somehow they can hurt his reputation to the point that his channels keep failing, not because has crap content and seems to think telling people that they're all losers, idiots, and morons who don't know how to play TTRPGs, but it's clearly all because of these bro OSR attacks. On a side note, that's one thing that he does that bothers me more than it really should, is he keeps saying bro OSR when he's referring to the bro SR. Set aside the fact that 99% of the people he keeps picking fights with are just regular OSR guys like Double D and the RPG Pundit. The dude keeps saying bro OSR and it's annoying. Dude, Clowndor, Steven, buddy. It's bro SR, not bro OSR. Like, they replaced the O in OSR with bro. Just watch him respond and focus entirely on that like it's all I have to say refuting his BS. The amount of projection and delusional narcissism that comes from this guy is staggering. I did a D&D Reacts to Condor's last aborted attempt at a channel reboot where I said that it isn't even good enough to agree with him 99% of the time. If you aren't 100% in lockstep, you're a garbage, fake game master who doesn't know anything about TTRPGs and should immediately leave the hobby right now. But of course, we're all the ones who are running off the new players. Even his gaming advice videos, and I use gigantic square quotes around that description, are typically just 4 to 5 minutes of him telling you why he's right, everyone else is wrong, and you're all just a bunch of inexperienced, shit loser nerd wannabes. And by the way, you're only mad and responding because he embarrassed you by pointing out how wrong all your ideas and opinions are, not because he called you a worthless retard whoreson who should off themselves for the betterment of society in the process of doing so. The dude is a sad, pathetic little clown, and what very little of merit comes out of his mouth is basic first day game master stuff. He's more or less a fat, offensive, unpleasant, bizarro world of Jenny D. He's boorish, unattractive, thoroughly unpleasant old school guy giving extremely generic advice to 5 followers, as opposed to a raging tyrannical social leftist who's easy on the eyes and at least pretends to be congenial on camera, giving generic 5e advice for tabletop improv theater sessions. So, what triggered this rant? Well, mainly the rant is about his general stupidity, but in one of his 18 videos in the past 2 days, Condor chose to talk about fudging dice, which is just so happens to be a topic that I had set aside for You're Doing It Wrong. According to his video, fudging dice is cheating. It's unacceptable. And there's no real debate. Fudging dice is wrong. And of course, it means you're a shitty game master and a liar and a cheat if you ever fudge dice. Well, I guess that means that Gary Gygax was a shitty game master too. Because in addition to his famous quote, "A DM only rolls the dice because of the noise they make," he also clearly stated in the first edition Dungeon Master's Guide on page 110, under the heading, "Rolling the Dice and Control of the Game," quote, "You do have every right to overrule the dice at any time if there is a particular course of events that you would like to have occur," unquote. That is in no uncertain terms Gary Gygax, creator of Dungeons & Dragons, godfather of tabletop role-playing games, and oldest magister of the oldest school, telling game masters that it is permissible to fudge dice rolls in one of his core rulebooks. He later discusses the use of discretion and even speaks on altering outcomes to prevent a player from losing a beloved character to nothing more than freakishly bad dice rolls when played well and wisely. So, how are we doing it wrong when it comes to fudging dice? Well, like most of these TTRPG questions, it's both complicated and simple, and it exists in a world of grays and eggshells instead of blacks and whites. There are times when old Steve-O is correct. An example is in running the Tomb of Horrors. A die roll should never, under any circumstances, be altered in that module. Why? Because that particular module was written to be a challenge to the players themselves. The story in Tomb doesn't happen in the imaginary world of the characters. It happens in the real world of the gaming table, where the exhilaration and joy is found in the accomplishment of guiding your character through the halls of Ashurak's tomb. The entire adventure is designed as a metagame experience. To change a roll, for good or ill, cheats the player either by cheapening their accomplishment or depriving them of what they earned through their exceptional gameplay, or even just through their good fortune. That is to say that if there is an explicit understanding that the purpose of your game is to provide a gaming challenge, or if there is ever a situation where a player is opposing another player, the implicit agreement is that the random mechanic, be it dice, cards, tokens, coins, or drawing straws, must be the neutral arbiter. So what about the rest of the time? That's where dice fudging becomes far more nuanced. The first point that must be made is all dice fudging must be in secret. If players know you fudge a roll, it becomes an issue every time. It gets exploited as players take greater and greater risks, expecting to get saved, then becoming incensed when their risky behavior blows up in their face. It becomes a bone of contention when you save one player or let him succeed, then allow the damage die to take the character of another player. If players know that you are changing the results, then you are doing it wrong, plain and simple. There's no benefit to that scenario. This is why, once again referring to the 1E DMG, Gygax said that the DM should almost always roll behind a screen and not out in the open. The next point is knowing when and how to fudge. These are both a bit more complicated than it may seem. How is it complicated to know how to fudge dice, Daniel? All you do is roll behind the screen and change the number. Easy. Well, yeah, but that isn't what I mean. If you fudge a roll, how you do it matters as much as when you do it. For instance, take an attack against a player. That can be fudged a few different ways. The monster rolls 4 hits. Maybe it turns out one's a miss. Hint, hint, wink, wink. But I wouldn't want them all to miss. Or maybe I just need to adjust the damage down a little. Perhaps I tap that critical hit die and turn it from a natural 20 to a natural 19. The correct answer is different in each situation because I don't want to put the training wheels on and just make the character invincible, but I also don't want the party fighter torn to pieces in the first attack of an early encounter. I don't want it to get down to the wire and a lucky crit with high damage ends the campaign in some less than cinematic encounter. I need the players to feel the rush of danger and lethality while retaining the ability to feel the triumph of success over a challenge, and that is how the dice get fudged. It's all in how the dice get fudged. When to fudge is a bit easier to wrap your head around. The long and short is you fudge dice when it enhances the game for the players in either a narrative or metagame sense. Narrative meaning it has to do with the story that's being told within the game. It has to do with what's happening to the characters and what's unfolding there. And metagame, of course, meaning having to do more with things that are outside the actual story of the game. So for a narrative stance, I'm going to use an example from Seth Skorkowski. I'm going to link his video in the description and above. He showed a skit where the last member of the party squares off with a fallen paladin for the final fight. The blackguard swings and kills the last member of the party. Game over. Man, that kinda sucked. Well, you know what? The dice spoke. He then replays that skit. Last member of the party squares off with a fallen paladin. Blackguard swings. 12 damage. A few shots later, game over. The dice have spoken, and you lose. But man, you almost had him. 6 rounds one-on-one with a fallen paladin with the fate of the world on your shoulders. Man, that was a great game. The ultimate outcome wasn't changed, and in all likelihood the player went in knowing failure was going to be the eventual outcome. But dice fudging turned that failure from just a final letdown and a frustrated defeat that was building over the past few encounters as the party died out into an exhilarating fight against impossible odds that was almost a legendary success for the ages. The GM in that story didn't give the players a guaranteed win or an unfair advantage. He simply gave them hope that the impossible could be achieved in spite of a night of bad luck. This is fudging for a narrative purpose. So what is enhancing the game in the metagame sense? Fudging in the metagame sense is when the adjustments are made for any number of reasons that have nothing to do with the story being told at the table. The simplest example is when the GM screws something up in a big way. For instance, you put in a set of auto turrets that are intended to be disabled via a net running action. However, you made the massive error of making the encryption DCs too high for your party's net runner to overcome since you never adjusted for the fact that you had stripped the party of most of their equipment earlier. They're left either with a firefight with the turrets or a battle with an enemy net runner for control of the security system. The obstacles in this encounter are now well beyond the abilities of the party. Time to keep fudging in your back pocket as an option so your gang of edge runners aren't unceremoniously turned to Swiss cheese because you, as the GM, screwed up and stacked a few too many things against them. I did this, personally, in my Cyberpunk Red game. In Cyberpunk Red, the players' attacks are rolled against a fixed DC. They're not rolled against an armor class or something like that, so they know whether or not they're hitting or missing. I couldn't just make the turrets easier to hit. The armor ablation and other stats are generally pretty well known too. There wasn't any changing the encounter on the fly. I was left with the choice of the Deus Ex Machina to come down and have one turret just malfunction for no reason, or I had the option to fudge the dice and make sure that instead of 66 coming up with 25 damage, it came up with 12. Or that maybe the machine turrets didn't hit. There's a concept in engineering that comes up, and it comes up in engine building with cars, called stacking tolerances. This is when you tighten up several pieces in a mechanical system, all of which are perfectly fine on their own, but when you put it all together, you end up with a machine where the dimensions of the various parts must be so precise that the machine will never be able to function reliably in the real world. It happens to the absolute best of game masters. When it does, alterations have to be made to ensure that the session runs smoothly, and dice fudging is simply a tool in that toolbox. Don't let anyone tell you that you're somehow a shitty GM or a lying, dishonest cheat because you put running a good adventure filled with fond memories, fun, and good times over some arbitrary adherence to rules that are actually countermanded by other rules in the same book by the same man. You're doing it wrong because you are more concerned with numbers on plastic and pluses and minuses on pages than you are about ensuring an experience your players want to relive again and again. So fudge or fudge not. It doesn't matter if you fudge dice rolls, only why and how you choose to do so. So like, share, subscribe. I'll see you guys next time. And Steven, get off YouTube, get off social media, and please get some professional help.